Hello, folks, and welcome to the Genuinely Interested podcast where I chat with people that I'm genuinely interested in. It's a podcast where I can talk to people, get their story, get a better understanding of who they are and what they've been through, and in the process, maybe learn something about myself or leave just a little bit better and hopefully a little bit wiser. Today on the podcast, I have Teddy Hose, who is a fascinating person with an even more interesting story. We discuss living and leaving a cult, and he tells us about his experience inside the Moonies cult, which he was a part of for many, many years. So without further ado, I give you Teddy Hose.
All right.
Hey, Teddy. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good, man. Thanks for being on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
So you're currently in LA, right?
San Francisco.
Sorry, my bad. Yeah.
No worries. Yeah.
But you grew up in New York.
Yeah, I kind of went back and forth. I grew up in New York, like in Tarrytown, New York, till I was like 13, and then we moved to Seattle or Bellevue, Washington, which is right outside Seattle, in my teens. And then I was in New York City, just living all around it through my 20s, and then moved to San Francisco when I was 30. So a lot of back and forth.
Yeah, so all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's pretty awesome. So, I mean, why don't you tell the people, a little bit about who you are, how you grew up, and just, kind of an overview of your super, super interesting story.
Oh, thanks. My name's Teddy Hose, and I live in San Francisco. Right now, I do multimedia design for LinkedIn, so that's kind of a pretty cool job. So that's mostly like motion graphics. I studied animation in art school. I was at the School of Visual Arts in New York in my 20s. But I guess, the reason I'm on this podcast today is because I grew up in a religious cult called the Unification Church, or the Moonies. I like to talk about it because I think a lot of people, in recent years, it feels like people are talking about cults, more about all the different facets and the complexities and the differences. They don't all come as like one type of cult, Mine was, my childhood was very, let's see. It was a mix of like, we were treated as special being born into the Unification Church because my parents joined in the 60s. And so I was born into it. And so I grew up like feeling that I was part of this special community. We had properties. These properties that were kind of nice were around Tarrytown, New York. These were all kind of made from like exploited money from labor trafficking, mostly from these like really, these members who are obsessed with kind of working for the church. They believe they're doing God's work. So I grew up in these nice properties, actually, but at the same time, this was in the 80s. People knew who Moonies were, or they were in the media as like, this is like a cult. This was not long after Jim Jones, the mass suicide. So there was this stigma about cults, and that made me actually a pretty anxious and, how do you call it? Like kind of socially crippled kid. Like I didn't trust the world. I saw in the media how they talked about Moonies. So whereas I had a lot of trust in this community, and we actually, we all got along. It was very international. Again, we had properties, things were kind of okay. You step outside of that, you go to any public place on your own or whatever. And, there's a lot of anxiety of like, oh, if someone finds out I'm a Moonie, then they're going to like, I don't know what's going to happen to me, So there's a lot of fear.
And that serves basically the Unification Church, right? Or other cults. Like that's what they want members to feel. They want to feel safe in their own community and a sense of dread and anxiety when they go outside, correct?
Yes, totally. The leader of the church, his name was Sun Myung Moon. He died in 2012, and he believed he was the second coming of Jesus. He came from what is now North Korea, and he just built his way up. He talked to some people with money, and they got into the church, and then he got really rich, and then the rest is history. So yeah, I think, he just wanted to have people under his control, just like, like R. Kelly has something similar. And people with a lot of money and power, sometimes if they're narcissists, then this is what happens, So, yeah.
And So what was his overall, promise, or what was he, because I feel like cults do have some sort of, there's something that puts them all together in the same bowl, but there's also something that separates them. Like what was special about the Moonies? What was his overall promise, or what were the kind of people he was trying to go after to join the church?
Yeah. That's a good question. It was like a Christian based church. And so because he said he was the second coming, he said like he's continuing Jesus's mission. He said like the crucifixion of Jesus was actually, Jesus didn't complete his mission. So, Sun Myung Moon was there to, continue it. So that was kind of the promise, that we would be, okay, being born into it.
Mm-hmm.
The pre-existing belief is just like in Christianity. There's like the fall of man, right? There's like Adam and Eve sinned in the Garden of Eden, who were the first humans, according to this Christian scripture. And because they sinned, everyone who was born from them is sinful. So that's So basically, the Messiah comes to cleanse people of that sin. So if you join the Unification Church, or the Moonies, as they were known in pop culture, then he would cleanse you of that sin. So like we were born sinless. And, besides that, again, there were these like nice properties and like facilities. There was like a very high concentration of wealth, while at the same time there were these like, very devout members who were being labor trafficked, just, fundraising door to door, just selling trinkets for years, even living in vans and motels and whatever they could do to just keep working. So it was very two polarized sides to the Unification Church.
So was this kind of like Scientology, where members have to relinquish all their assets, their money, just give everything away to the church?
Yes, yeah, they found ways to just religiously guilt people into doing that, or just I think because there was such a because again the church had so much in terms of these like nice, they had like mansions and stuff that people lived in. People were like, wow, this life is so much better, and they just like, I mean, I can't speak for those people because I was born into it and I never had to give up things, but
yeah, we have to make that distinction too.
Yeah,
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You were born into it. This isn't something that you decided to. This is just, something you had to do.
Yeah, but I think my parents and mostly my parents' friends, yeah, especially those who came from like wealthy homes, like they were asked to give up a lot. Some of them said no. Like my parents made friends with one person I know in San Francisco, and she was like, "Nope, sorry, that's the end of my membership." But she kept her friends in it.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of complex stories, but some of them just willingly gave it up, and that's where whenever my parents told me about one of them, like I'm just like cringe. One woman gave, I think, what was it, like 600 million yen total to like Unification Church, and
wow, what is that in dollars?
Sorry,
what is that in dollars?
Actually, I don't know. It has to be at least
it's a lot. Yeah, hundreds of millions. Yeah, that sounds like a lot. Yeah, I believe like because we were talking via email a few times, and I believe you told me that New Yorker Hotel on 34th and 8th belongs to the Unification Church. I had no idea.
Yeah, it's crazy. You see it in music videos or like in documentaries or whatever. It was this building.
You would never think.
And it's also where Nikola Tesla died. Actually, it's kind of an interesting fact. Yeah. They've owned it. And when I lived in Tarrytown, in a house in Tarrytown that was church property, when I was a kid, we would go to that building on 34th Street for church holidays. There were church holidays like Parents' Day or Children's Day. They were kind of like these arbitrary, just kind of familial kind of holidays. And so we would basically all go there. It was great for me to like go and see all my friends, and just, we'd go across the street to McDonald's or something. That's as good as it got in New York if you were a kid. But it felt pretty cool to be in this building, and we would just go to all the different floors and the elevator and just like play hide and seek. Like, it was pretty amazing. But at the same time, the other side was like, we'd have to get up early. Like if it was the New Year or something, we called it God's Day. New Year's. I don't know. I guess we had to rebrand it to make it our own. And then, like we'd have to stay up at like, get up at like 5 a.m. or something and listen to like an hours long speech, just sitting on the rug, on the floor in the grand ballroom. Like that's a cult thing. Cults, usually have a speaker who will go on for hours and hours. And like, it's just the narcissism, like Jim Jones had like, these like, what do you call them? These megaphones like all over, his place in Guyana. And he would just speak just nonstop all day while people would work the fields. Just anyway, so I'm just glad to be away from that.
That's a really crazy story. So what would you say, or I don't know if that's even something that existed, but was there a daily schedule that you guys kept, or just something you kind of had to do morning, afternoon, nighttime, or was it, just, I don't know, kind of like just any other religious school where you would have to, do the teachings, obey the nuns or whoever taught you, or just, I guess, what was the structure?
There were a lot of things that were just like a regular Christian church. Like we had church on Sundays and, the little donation basket. And, we basically, it was like abstinence was a big deal, save sex for marriage, because, if you had sex with someone outside of the church, then they were of the original sin blood lineage, so then all that, all those years would be ruined of trying to like cleanse humanity of original sin. So that was a big no-no in the church, and that kind of messed me up. But I mean, I see it that way now. But anyway, it's just I'm just a late bloomer to put it lightly. Like we did have, there was this one thing called Pledge that we did every Sunday morning. Every Sunday at 5 a.m. we would get up and bow 3 times, do a full like Korean bow down to the floor to a picture of Reverend and Mrs. Moon. And, we would like read this pledge card that had this like almost like militaristic style. Like, I will fight, with my blood, sweat, and tears for the kingdom of heaven to come and for, humanity to blow up, basically just really getting you into like a soldier mode about your devotion, to this movement. And so, and meanwhile, we're bowing right after you bow to a picture of these people that we were taught to love more than our own parents. So, it was it's pretty great, but that was all normal to me as a kid. I was just like, well, this is our culture and other people have theirs. And I guess this is how we do it, but then you grow up and you're like, oh, that was really fucked up, so. Yeah.
So that's exactly that was my next question. Like at what point were you realizing like, wait a minute, no, something's wrong. Something's off. This is not gelling well. This is just doesn't make any common sense. At what point did you realize that?
It was kind of it wasn't an immediate thing. Some parts were, but, like first my family left, when we moved to, Bellevue, Washington, on Reverend Moon's command, he said, go to your father's hometown and, go witness to more people. So we moved away from New York, my dad grew up in Seattle, but, we moved to Bellevue. I guess it was more of a school district kind of thing. I don't know. But, anyway, my parents kind of felt like that was them getting away from the headquarters in New York, far away enough that they didn't have to kind of go through the motions and involve themselves as much. And I think they stopped paying like the church fees. Like they would always like ask for these like, $1,000 donations every few weeks to like help us with this campaign or something, which, but anyway, we don't know where that money went, but we kind of have an idea. But, so that was like one level of it. We kind of slowly drifted away, like socially, I think, from the church, and a lot of other people in the Northwest did too. I think they were all away from like the church centers in California and New York. But then when I was 18, I talk about this a lot in my interviews, but, the definitive moment for me was, and this was like after my parents kind of made it clear when I was around 18 that we're not really in the church anymore. I don't have to go to the arranged marriage, which is part of the church, and that's a whole nother story. But so after that, I was like, oh man, it kind of hit me like a ton of bricks. I was like, but this is my whole identity. This is all I know. What about my childhood friends? Do I have to leave them? Like, it was really hard because it was a very polarized community that, is, while the rest of the world just seems like this thing you look at through a window and lightly involve yourself with. So I was like, shoot, now I have to like catch up with the rest of the world. But shortly after that, like on my own, I remember in New York, like since I grew up near the Moon family in Tarrytown, I saw some of them around town sometimes. I didn't really interact with them much because they were all, kind of manipulative people. Some of them are kind of like bullies. So, you can imagine that they have they're worshipped since they were born. So, but there was this one who was like a gentler kid, and he always seemed kind of melancholy. His name was, Youngjin Moon. His American name was Philip Moon. And when I think he was like 21 or maybe like 20, around that time, he actually committed suicide, which was really sad.
Wow.
And yeah, so I thought the church would have maybe a moment of silence or, commemorate him or something. But immediately they sent an email out to all these church members and said, this is your fault. Like, you didn't have enough faith and you made this happen. And it was like so disgusting to me. And I was like, right there, I saw what their priority was. And I was just done immediately.
Oh, wow. That's, I'm surprised. Was that something that you think had an impact on other people? Or did you see other people potentially leave or discuss this? Or was this just, just you?
I think in my case, it might have been just me, or there might have been a few others who were maybe my age who knew him as a kid too, because he was pretty close to my age. Yeah, I think for other people, it was like, Sun Myung Moon had what he called quote unquote providential affairs, where he just like, he got caught cheating and he was oh, this is, he's like, oh, I'm cleansing their wombs or something like that, just total messianic, like, so, but I could go on about it, but if you look at the real origins of the church, if you look at the real origins of the church, there's a book called, Ritual Sex and Change of Blood Lineage in the Unification Church. And it's written by a former member who did a lot of research after. And in Korea, there were like these shamanistic groups where they believed that, this is the early 1900s, that, you have to have sex with the leader in order to join the group. So there were like circles of this, like maybe around where Sun Myung Moon lived. And he was one of them. He was the sex cult leader. So he always had these beliefs. And I think when he came to America with his church in the 50s, he knew that he couldn't get away with that here. We don't have that kind of folklore. Like, we're very anti that, in conservative America. So, or Christian America. So, I think, he kept that underground, but then it peeked its head up again. And I think people started, dropping off after that. But it's still worldwide. They still have a lot of money and businesses. They like have, True World Foods, which is like, the largest distributor of sushi in America. And the Washington Times, which is, the Washington Times is a paper that Sun Myung Moon started. It didn't make a profit for over 3 decades until it went online because, labor traffic church members were sustaining it. It's basically a propaganda machine for like, Sun Myung Moon's like beliefs, and I don't know, just along the lines of far right America, basically, which is very clenching on this Christian narrative. So yeah.
Wow, I had no idea. I think most people would have no idea that they own the Washington Times.
Oh yeah, I try to get it out there. I'm like, please realize what you're reading and what you're quoting, because like Fox News and Rush Limbaugh and all of them, they all quote it because it's like they see what they want to see. And there used to be laws that regulated, like, what was that called? The Fairness Doctrine, where you always had to report news, but show like a counter statement or something, just to report balanced news. But I think in the 80s, like Reagan, like repealed that. He was like, well, our freedom, blah, blah, blah. And from there, news became very polarized, but I don't know.
Well, nowadays you have, Twitter and YouTube, and anyone with a blog can be a journalist and put out misleading information. And there's really no they're not no one's holding them to the fire. They can pretty much say whatever they want. So, someone like Rush Limbaugh with, I don't know how many millions of people follow him each day. So, but that's forget it. That's a different story.
Yeah.
Politics. Yeah, we can go into that. I'm sure and talk for hours, but we don't want to go into that. So I feel like there's always a common thread when you talk about cults. There's always exploitation, if it's either financially or sexually, and they always try to keep control of the members. There's always that, one charismatic leader that everyone reveres, and they see him as some sort of a demigod, or, some sort of a prophet. And it's always authoritarian. And I believe that, they were talking about some of these things in the Netflix thing that actually where I saw you speaking, and that's why I wanted to reach out and talk to you. It seems a little bit, if you look at it, there's that joke, what a cult plus time equals religion.
Right.
I always thought that it was true. And when I saw it on the episode, when they said, I was like, oh, okay, so it's not just my opinion. This is something that a lot of people talk about. And it was just really interesting to kind of see that. The other thing I was thinking, I think throughout, history, there've been a lot of different reasons for people obviously joining cults, from, security to higher meaning to maybe feeling some sort of a purpose or being part of a community. I'm sure there's a lot of other factors as well. But I was thinking, I think today, loneliness plays a factor, much more than it used to be before. I think I don't know if it's social media or the internet that supposedly we're supposed to connect us all. I think it's made us a little bit more isolated. Do you think that plays potentially a role in why people are joining cults today?
Yeah, I definitely think living, digital, social media, everything. I feel like people maybe aren't getting together as much, and they're talking through these channels where, I do think about that a lot. Yeah, I do. How, when you're talking to someone in person, you're not just seeing words on the screen, you can pick up on tone. There's a little more vulnerability. There's a little more at stake, I feel like. So people are going to probably be better about confronting certain topics and stuff. But when you're behind a computer screen and you're just typing words on a screen, you get away with anything. So I think people's radical views can spread like wildfire, if they are charismatic enough, or, if they just know how to work with people, what people are angry about, they can exploit them that way, or just indoctrinate them through that. And I think that's what's happening around the world, politically, you can just find your own echo chamber. You don't have to find right answers. You just have to find some kind of confirmation that your views are reflected by someone else, online. And I think those are things that really need to be tackled, policy wise, with social media and internet. And that's something we're going through right now. So definitely, yeah. You hear about ISIS, recruits through Tinder, just it's getting pretty crazy,
Yeah, that's bizarre. That's, but right. It works. People want to feel like they're part of a community. People want, and, if you have, I don't know about the left, but I know the right have the Fortune and, Pepe the Frog and communities on Reddit and other blogs and stuff. And, it's a place where they fester these horrible ideas and somehow sometimes it spills over to the real world, which is, that's when you see shootings and that's when you see rallies for Nazis or whatever it is. So that's pretty unfortunate.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that there's just this obsession with guns, and so, I in two other podcasts I was in, one Generation Cult, and other one's Indoctrination. I quoted Sun and Moon basically ordering, because he liked guns. I don't know. He was into guns, and like all the way back to the 60s, he started a gun company, and he was like, we have to sell as many guns as possible in America. I forgot what his reasoning was, but it was like, to defend our morals or something. Basically everything you hear about today, like about, uprising or something, like he was saying that back in the 60s. So it makes me really question, how much he's actually one of the driving engines of that whole momentum, because he has he has just a lot of exploited money. And I think he has weapons dealings with Korea. He sells to the military in Korea or something. I don't know. That's the rumor. But basically, yeah, he's very intertwined with, these politicians and lobbying, and so I don't know if you also saw that I'm also in this A&E show called Cults and Extreme Belief, but
no, I haven't.
Oh, okay. Well, on that topic,
but I definitely will. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I appreciate it. This was like in 2018. I think it came out in summer of 2018, and I basically talk about Sanctuary Church, or it's called like World Peace and Unification Sanctuary is the official title, and that's one of Sun Myung Moon's son's cults. And I don't know if you saw this in the news, but they were the ones who had like the bullet crowns, and they had the ceremony where they had the AR-15 guns.
Yes. I saw this on, I believe it was Vice, where, they were all sitting in church. Everyone, I think I think there was a mass wedding happening or something, and everyone had like AR-15s and M16s, and it looked like they were ready to go to war.
Right. Yeah. So I went to, like, I think it was the first one of those in like February of 2018, and I basically like helped protest, and I talked about my growing up in his father's cult, and like the group itself, and I even talked to one of the members who was the second generation, and I saw that he approached people striking. This kid who was like born into the Sanctuary Church or Unification Church, and then his family joined the Sanctuary Church after Reverend Moon died, and I could see that he was trying to come with like a peaceful attitude, like, hey, what's going on here, so I felt like I could talk to him, and I felt like I had a pretty good talk, but there's no like really, it's such its own world. And I've learned a lot about brain science over the last few years, and when your brain is just in that world so much, it takes a lot of negotiation to really start seeing things outside of it, or like a psychological shock, or some proper cognitive dissonance or whatever. So, I just tried to talk to him and make him consider things. I told him about how the leader of that group of Sanctuary Church, Sean Moon, like he was a total bully as a kid. Like he would lock kids in the closet, and he would make them fight for his entertainment. Like these are second generation, just regular church kids. Yeah. To him, like it was like people were like toys, to any of the Moon kids, like other, church member kids were toys, and they just, played with their power with them. There was no making a genuine friendship with these people. And I can't blame them. Like if I grew up like that, I'd be like that too. So I just, and I think Sean Moon, he's trying to like make things different. I can tell he's trying to be, it's weird, but he's actually a little bit of a hippie in it all too. He's like, we're going to do these. He wants to be like radical and alt-right, but he's just completely not self-aware, and he's completely, I don't think he'll change for anyone because of the way he grew up. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's extremely, difficult. I remember, I'm Jewish, and I know there's a huge ultra Orthodox community here living in Williamsburg, not exactly where I live, but not too far away. And there was a documentary I was watching a couple of years back about a few people that left the community. It's extremely difficult for them to leave the community. Their family denounces them, so they're not going to, they stop any contact with them. So all their friends, their sister, their mother, their father, shunned from the community. They can't go back. On top of that, they weren't told and taught the basic ABCs, the skills to kind of how to get a job, some of them don't even know English that well because they speak Yiddish. They don't know the months because they have a different calendar. So just everything, they were just have almost zero options to succeed in the real world. And these poor kids, they were like, I think 16 to 18. They were really trying, but I think a couple of them went back, a couple of them stayed, but it's extremely, extremely tough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, you probably, I don't know how intense your family was when it or devout, but maybe not as much as Orthodox, but
no, my family's pretty much, my father's atheist, and he kind of, he was very anti-religion my whole life, and I was somewhat. I mean, I went to a religious school when I was young, just because default that was the only school that was in the area, so that's the one I went to, and it was about 5 or 6 years. So I kind of dabbled. I was thinking about, but not becoming more religious, but there was something very enticing about it. A few of my friends were a little bit religious, but I think around my early 20s, I decided that's definitely not something I'm interested in. And the older I grew, the less interested in religion I got. I'm very interested in the psychology of it, but the reality behind it just diminished for me with time. So It's not something, luckily, yeah.
Right. Yeah, it sounds like it was maybe you were quote unquote social Jew more, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think that's big. Like, I think it's good to, you want to feel like you belong to something bigger than your family. It's nice to have a community. So, absolutely, I don't like put down anyone who are part of any kind of religion unless that religion thinks it's like, it has an obsession with trying to indoctrinate everyone else. That's where it's a problem, But and that's actually another thing I read about. I guess in 17th century America, a lot of, I don't know if you know this, but like a lot of the European religious, the hardcore religious folk were exiled, and they came to America where they could, because I guess Europe became more kind of socially conscious and went beyond just one type of faith. So they felt like they had to build that somewhere else. So they came to America, and I'm like, that really says a lot, with the climate in America, the social climate and the religious, fanaticism, and how it's still something that's honored. So, even the most extreme, ways. And for example, the tax breaks, you can just say something's religious.
Insane.
And
insane.
Yeah. So I don't know. And because at the time in the 17th century, there were the punishment is death if you don't follow our church, so it's it shows you where that strain of America came from. I mean, America is very progressive in a lot of other ways and intelligent and, open-minded, but anyway.
But it's also the most, I think I read somewhere, it's the most religious country out of all the kind of Western countries, if I'm not mistaken. So I think it has the highest. I think Iceland had the highest amount of atheists, and I think the U.S. had the most amount of religious people. So I don't know. It's very divided.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you think you would have, if your parents wouldn't have gradually left the church, do you think you would have been able to do it by yourself?
It's hard to say. There are some families in the church who they have that one, really dedicated, I have to save my family, type. And I was like that, for maybe a few weeks or something after, my parents said we weren't really in the church. I think that was me going through cognitive dissonance, but not really knowing what to believe. But I think if they, oh, I'm sorry, you said if they didn't leave?
Yeah, if they would have kept, if they would have stayed in the church, do you think you would have had, the courage or the foresight to say like, okay, this isn't for me. I see what's wrong with this, and I want out.
You know, I think maybe I think that would be a mixed answer of like socially I might still be inclined to be in it, but I think the fact is a lot of second generation just ended up leaving, like almost everyone I know, whether their parents left or not. So I think I would have tried to be cool with my friends and been like, oh cool, I'm going to leave too. At the time I was maybe more like I think, not to say I just will jump off a cliff like my friends do, to use that old metaphor.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
but like, I think that would have added some pressure of like, really, you're going to stick with this? Like, I think so. Probably not. I would say most likely not. But there's a chance that I would have, and not to go into another long answer, but like there's
Oh, no,
this.
take your time. We have all the time in the world. Yeah.
You can always edit, right? So
exactly.
Yeah. So there's this one church center. It's like this it's almost like the Mecca of the Unification Church. It's called Chungpyeong. It's in South Korea. It's this like healing center where you go, and if you look at it and you don't know anything about it, it just looks like, oh yeah, this is definitely a cult. Like basically you have these sessions where you have a bunch of people in a room and someone in the front is like banging these like Korean drums. And basically the spiritual practice is that if you slap yourself and slap each other, just like in Scientology, they believe there's like these little tiny like microscopic spirits inside your body and you have to slap them out. So that's like, so that's some kind of, they say there's like miracle healings, like people who couldn't walk can walk now because of it. And then you just like flood it with, lots of money, and it's crazy. It's just like Catholic indulgences. Like, the more money you give, the more generations you can liberate in the spiritual world, which is, the ancestral thing is like, kind of, I think, more of an Asian kind of, religious thing. But, so if there was a chance I was going to go do that. And when people go for like 40 days, usually that's like, the time that they go, or more. Some of them just stay there. You just get locked in and you keep like doing these rituals, and you get locked into the culture there. And I feel so good, I'm healing. Like I don't really know what it's like to have gone through that, but
yeah,
right when I was deciding which college to go to, I was like, should I go there instead? So yeah, it could have turned out very different.
Oh wow! So part of it is just basically slapping the shit out of each other.
Yeah, that's it. It's literally that.
Wow. Well, I hope no UFC fighter ever goes there and and knocks someone out accidentally.
Oh man, someone will probably, I don't know, if they did something really bad and they feel sinful, then they'll be like, they line up.
Yeah, the harder the slap, the more you cleanse your sins.
Yeah, it's not the only church that does that too. There's this other South Korean church called like Grace Road Church, and they also like the leader person will just bring someone up and like pull them by the hair and like punch them, and it's this like old woman. It's like, whoa.
Jesus.
Yeah, they're considered a cult too, and they just a lot of violence is encouraged, in it to like discipline or something, and they're spreading around. I think it's in Fiji. Like a lot of cults are going to Fiji and New Zealand, like these island countries. It's like, whoa.
Less
anyway.
regulations. Yeah,
maybe.
I think so. So, are you still in touch with anybody from that previous life? Any friends, family, anybody that's still in the church, or did you completely cut ties with with everything related to that?
Well, I feel kind of lucky compared to other maybe people who left religious cults or whatnot, because I feel like a lot of my parents' generation, like they also feel like well. I guess another like little thing to add is like my family, and like there's like maybe 4 or 5 other families whose they're kids I grew up being friends with. They were of like some of the earliest church members in America. So I think they were like, we had some status based on that. And, we actually lived in like a pretty decent house, and I see that now. And I feel like some people in the church will hate me for, doing that, or for like having grown up that way. But, while others grew up in like basements or like really impoverished. I feel like, we all kind of, it's interesting. It's like the kids of people who grew up in more prestigious or higher status church positions, they seem to have more flexibility. They're like, they can see more of the bullshit, and like they're more, or else I guess I'll say we're more like, I guess we are not as desperate to like strive to like prove that we're as more worthy or whatever. Even though I had the paranoia of being a cult member going to school, and I felt very detached from the world. But so anyway, I think with that flexibility came the ease of like just stepping away from it. Not the ease, but I don't think it was as risky. I think our parents just wanted us to do good, and our parents also were, because they gave up everything. I think they were like, they didn't want to admit it, but it was like, if we let our kids stay in this church, we're all going to be broke. And just like, so I think they would like go to college, get good jobs, and my parents are still very conservative. They're like Trump supporters. And, it's something that I have to kind of take a deep breath whenever I see them. I mean, I love my parents, and they raised us through really difficult times. And I care about them. We send them money like to help them out, because there's no retirement plan in a cult. But that's so. But they know that they can't cut me off, because like we help them, and not that that's the terms of our relationship, but I think, and I'd feel bad about cutting them off. But through therapy, I've also learned that the way we were parented was very not normal. And it was there was a lot of abandonment, and it was as if we had this ruling family who were our actual parents. And it's almost like my parents were like middle managers. That's like one term I've learned in studying cults and in my therapy is like parents are treated as middle managers. So like it's like kids and parents, it's not like a tight relationship, as tight of a relationship, because they change with whatever the cult leader wants. So it's almost like there's not as much respect, and there's not trust that like they're really going to be there for me, and I think now they realize that more. I don't know if they're going to hear this, so I want to be as respectful as I can, and not just for that, but I think they did genuinely try, but they were just very deluded by my parents they grew up kind of more on the poor side of society. And I think they just aren't as familiar with how more kind of wealthy and people who have like these more kind of manipulative agendas, how they operate, because I think when you grow up poor or like kind of in a more humble, socioeconomic status, you have to have integrity. You have to have, accountability. And so I think they expect that from other people. And so when they get pitched on someone who says they're like that, they will believe them, So that's kind of one thing that I've learned through all this is like, how to call out bullshit, basically. So I think my parents do have, they do try to have integrity and accountability, but in joining the church, they just, had no idea.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
I'm sure your bullshit radar is extremely proficient. you probably call bullshit a mile away.
Oh yeah. I'll post about it. You'll see it in my Twitter or whatever, like for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think cults, obviously they prey on everyone, but I think it doesn't necessarily have to be people from the lower socioeconomic groups. It could be, rich people. It's usually people that I think maybe look for some sort of a meaning or are a bit lost. I know Scientology, they get all the Hollywood elite, or not all, but some of the Hollywood elites, people who maybe are looking for, again, like, I don't know, higher purpose, some sort of a sense of spirituality or whatever it is. But it just, I think it preys on everyone, which is unfortunate. So
yeah,
what?
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna add to that. Yeah, like if you've seen Wild Wild Country in Netflix,
crazy documentary,
yeah,
crazy.
it's very good at kind of showing. Well, I like that it's like a series and it shows the complexity of everything and how people are still very emotionally attached to it. I'm still emotionally attached to my childhood in the Unification Church. It's sad that I can't access that without it being tainted now. But anyway, like in Wild Wild Country, like, you got the lawyer, you got like the finance people, you got, if you're going to build this cult society, you need all the like proper roles to keep a society going. So, that's kind of how I see it.
Yeah. And again, like you see him rolling in with an entourage of like 20 Cadillac or whatever, like flashy cars, like they always kind of, it's the same story, right? It's always repeating. It's the one guy, he's always got beautiful women around him, flashy cars, always a lot of money, mansions. He has to fly private. It's always the same. And it's the same with, there was I remember I forget where I saw this, but this was a few years back. And one of the evangelical preachers, he, was telling his followers that he has to have a private plane to do God's work. He can't do it on, just a regular commercial plane, because sometimes God speaks to him and he can't answer God on a commercial plane because people think he's crazy. So God told him that his followers must put money forth in order for him to buy his private jet. And they did. And these are people that, they don't have a lot of money. And they send him their hard-earned cash. And he ended up buying this huge jet. And then I remember, I think it was a year later, he asked for another one. So it's endless. Boy. It's a bottomless pit.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. For sure. Yeah, Sun Myung Moon he'd go to Las Vegas and he loved to gamble. And, my parents knew where that money was coming from. By then they kind of knew. I think Sun Myung Moon, as he got older, he just stopped caring as much and just started doing the things he wanted to do. And so and he just said like, oh, I'm going to Las Vegas because it's the city of sin and I have to restore it somehow with my messiahness. It's like, he's just like playing craps or something, with like exploited money. So dude is just like,
high roller table.
Yeah, so when Trump got elected or when he was like running for president, I was like, oh, this looks 100% familiar. And I started to write about it and like publish articles and like, to me, it was the same thing. I was like, he could say whatever. It's true. Like he could shoot someone in the middle of Fifth Avenue and, he'd still have devoted fans. Cause like that's a nurtured thing. I think it's almost like marinating something or, you can't just like when something's just so deep in you and you just develop this trust after so long, it's like, you can't walk away from it right away. It's like what people say about women in abusive relationships. It's like, why don't you walk away? It's like, oh my God, do you know anything about like the human psychology? Like it's not that easy because your brain builds a whole map around living a certain lifestyle and the do's and don'ts. And, it's literally building neural pathways in your brain of, all those things. And then you get new pleasure rewarding feelings by doing what, whatever the term says is the good thing to do. So that to me, I think that's one of the hardest things about if you're religious to like learn about the brain or whatever, because it completely just turns any fantasy of like, we're all going to be saved or this society will one day be like the new world of perfection. It's like, no, it's whatever your brain adapts to is going to, there's no happy ending and you have to make it like, or be lucky too, I guess. Yeah.
It's also just a strong sense of tribalism nowadays where if you attack me, I'm not going to think, oh, okay, wait, is there any merit to what you're saying? It's no, I'm going to attack back. And you see this so much online. There's just a lot of people screaming on one side and a lot of people screaming on the other side, and just not a lot of conversationing happening in the middle. No one wants to listen to what the other person has to say. They just want to attack, and the other group just wants to prove that their group is right. We're right. We have God on our side, or we have science on our, but there's just no middle ground for having decent, common sense conversation. I think that's true for a lot of different facets in our life, especially nowadays with Trump and the division that's happening in our country. But that's a whole other podcast.
Right.
Post Moonies, I mean, currently, like you said, you're in San Francisco, not LA, definitely San Francisco. What do you do nowadays? I know you're a comedian. You do a lot of different things. Kind of tell us a little bit more about what you do. Are you active against, obviously I know you do interviews and stuff, but how active are you in, talking out against the church, against cults in general?
I feel like I just kind of, let's see, how active am I? I'll put out something every now and then. Usually I'll react to something if something is just like, oh, that's too, like initially it was the Sanctuary Church having that gun ceremony. It was maybe a week or two after the Florida shooting, so I was just, and in my head, I wasn't really surprised. I was like, yeah, I remember how it felt to be so disconnected from current events in society, because you think that you have this, sacred society that's going to save everyone. So it doesn't matter outside of that anyway, but I felt like that was an opportunity to just point the media at them and being like, look at how disconnected they are. And like, I know what that does to you when you have to enter society as an adult, if you grow up in a situation like that. So I can't say much for the older members of that church. They've been in it for so long, first the Moonies and then now the Sanctuary Church. But, for the kids in it is more what I'm concerned about. Like when they enter society, they're going to have to process a lot of stuff. And like a lot of us have been through that before. And when the terms are just totally like, what do you want in your life? And you don't know who you are because you're in a cult, that's really hard to like really get to know who you are and feel okay with being your autonomous self. So, anyway, so I guess to segue into what I'm doing, I see an ex-cult therapist, which is amazing. But I think
wow.
in Northern California, I think there were so many cults from here, like Charles Manson and Jim Jones came through here. And there were so many from here that, someone who does ex-cult therapy is going to make a living. So it's pretty good.
Yeah.
So I do that. But yeah, I also, I do a lot of things. I grew up drawing. My dad was always an artist, and he did like calligraphy and stuff growing up. When he left the church, he went into like painting murals, and he does that in Monroe, Washington, out of Monroe. And so I always grew up with sketchbooks, and I was like, okay, and then I got into music. We moved to Seattle. It was in the 90s, so music was all around. I learned how to play guitar, and I learned a lot of songs. So I kind of go all over the place. I had a band in San Francisco over the first few years I was here called Geneva Pop, and it's kind of like a post-punk-ish band. I always, along with my day job, and I always have to keep one because, I got to help my folks out because we don't have anything to fall back on. Again, like in a cult, I always got to have some kind of security. So, I'm always working a day job. I do my own thing on the side. I have done comedy in the past year. I was thinking maybe doing something more like The Moth, or where I can do more kind of storytelling type comedy, because I feel like open mics are more like dick jokes and stuff. It's harder to, I mean, it always depends on the crowd, but I just feel like maybe I can like kick it up a notch and do maybe a storytelling. So there are storytelling nights in Oakland and in San Francisco. They have something called spontaneous storytelling, where people just get up there and there's a topic and you gotta, there's fun stuff like that. So I'd like to do more writing, or like more comedic writing. I got to figure it out. I'm actually due to see a career coach soon. Like there's so many things that I want to do, but I have to really wind it down. I got to narrow it into something that actually is plausible. So or practical.
Yeah, I'm the same. I'm the same. I love so many different things. It's always difficult to kind of narrow it down to just one thing. But I definitely think that, you have a very unique story that, 90+% of people do not have. So I feel like you're definitely going to find an audience for, a very attentive audience that would love to hear that story. You just have to find the correct channels to broadcast that. And I'm sure you will.
Thanks. Yeah. It's been good. I consciously decided to make this a thing in my life, maybe about a decade ago. And, I just always wanted to be a voice kind of here. But for me, the challenge is to, try to take it like there's a lot of people who talk about it and just, but I guess I want to add some art to it, maybe, and that's why I'd like to maybe talk about it in comedy or something. And, just something where it's going to be more palatable and then not just this dark thing that makes you feel like there's no hope in humanity. So
yeah.
I don't know. I think there's ways to do that. So it's good to have that for sure.
All right, awesome. I think we have reached the end of our podcast, but I want to thank you for taking an hour of your time and talking to us, and you're really well spoken, and I think again it's not a lot of people have an insight to that, so to hear from someone who does, it's, I think, super interesting. I know for me it is. That's why, I wanted to have you on. So again, thanks so much for, for coming on and talking. And maybe in the future you'll come back.
Yeah. Excuse me. Yeah, thanks. I always appreciate any opportunity to talk about it. So yeah, absolutely. This has been great. And I wish you well. And I hope you find other really cool people too to talk to.
All right, man. Appreciate that. All right. So we'll be in touch and
Awesome. Yeah. Can't wait to hear it.
All right, man. Bye-bye.
Take care.
We'll be in touch and
Awesome. Yeah. Can't wait to hear it.